So this is my alligator snapping turtle pond, and one just went down below the surface. So you can see the water is very murky, a mixture of muddy and algae, flocculent algae in the water column. But the snappers in here are thriving. They are doing awesome. This is a bit of an experiment for me. I want to talk a little bit about this pond and tell you kind of what my experiences are with it in case you have the the urge to do this experiment for yourself or explore some different options. So alligator snapping turtles are my favorite species of turtle. I love them, and I've been keeping them for almost 30 years. And I've been growing up a group of hatchlings for that time. Well, they are getting pretty big. And I've also got a quite old animal as well. But I wanted a natural pond for my alligator snapping turtles. I had been keeping all of them in stock tanks, such as what we see here. And that's great for juveniles, especially when you put some sand substrate in there. But for adults, obviously, especially if you're going to breed them, you need to have a land area. And a natural pond just really fulfills all their biological needs as well as psychological needs. They're able to burrow into the mud. They're able to do all the things that a snapping turtle would do in the wild. And especially for alligator snapping turtles, they're very sensitive to the type of substrate that you provide them with. And if you keep an alligator snapping turtle long term on a hard surface, such as concrete or bare plastic, but especially concrete, or even gravel, it will erode the bottom of their shell over time. It will erode the plastron. You'll have exposed bone on that plastron, which opens them up to infection. And this is otherwise an incredibly hardy, robust species. So I wanted to build this pond. I'm getting kind of long-winded here, but this was an experiment that I did over several iterations. So I started this a year ago, and I dug out this area that we see right here. And at first, this was just pretty shallow. I just wanted to see how easy it would be to dig. And I dug out a pretty good-sized chunk of this in just a couple hours, and it kind of gave me the incentive to try and go further. And then I dug out that section, sort of the base of the L shape, and I wanted to see, this was me just having time off during the summer and wanting to experiment and see how deep I could go before I got a lot of rain and filled this thing up with water. And I wanted to see if the soil would hold it. So I dug down as deep as I could. I got about 4 feet deep in that section before I hit solid rock. And with just hand tools, a shovel and a pickaxe, I couldn't bust through it. So I was like, well, 4 feet deep is pretty good. That's deep enough that it would allow them to hibernate. And as I was digging, I started piling up the clay soil along the edge and created that berm that we see there and along the other side there. So I just piled that up, and it actually allowed me to elevate the water depth a little bit more because that served as an additional boundary. And because I have clay soil, that forms a watertight seal, and it's as good as a pond liner at keeping the water in here. Now, I already had the cypress tree planted, and he's a little guy still, but he is growing quite fast now that he has a lot of water around him. So, my long-term goal is to make this sort of a cypress swamp for these guys. And then I dug this section. This was the latest section to be excavated. So at first, it was just the long side of the L, and that filled with water, and I put 2 of the snappers in there. Well, I had a stock tank here, which I was then able to move and then excavate this. And this is also pretty deep. This goes to about 3 feet deep. And you see that driftwood in the center, that's a big tree stump. So it is sticking out a little bit, but that's about 2 feet deep right where that tree stump is. And, believe it or not, there are 4 pretty good sized alligator snapping turtles in this pond. And for dimensions, and for size perspective, the long side of the L is probably about it's about 25 feet long, and this shorter section, 15 to 20 feet. It does vary a little bit as we get more or less rain, of course, but it may look small, but it's pretty good sized. And it's deeper than it was when I initially dug it, because the snappers are continuing to dig and burrow down in there. So they are shaping this pond. Now, obviously, when you're working with any species, you're worried about bioload and how many animals you can sustainably keep in a habitat. So that was obviously a concern, but they are doing extremely well in this habitat. And if you know anything about this species, they are found in a variety of different habitats in the wild as far as water quality goes, or turbidity, right? So this is a pretty turbid pond. I mean, I would love it if the water was crystal clear, but the snappers probably would not. Now, as the summer progresses, I will add more emergent vegetation like water hyacinths. There's a few in here now, but those will grow and spread over most of the surface as the summer continues, and that'll provide a lot of biological filtration and some mechanical filtration. They do pull some of that flocculent mud and algae out of the water column. But that's a long-winded way of me saying the turtles are doing great in here, and I haven't had any issues with bio overload or anything like that. There are fish in here as well. So if we were running into problems with high levels of ammonia or nitrates or things like that, the fish would start to suffer. So they are a good indicator species for us in here, and they're doing well. But back to just the basics of this pond. I dug this out by hand. It's a clay-based soil here. This pond holds water just as if it were a liner. It's a totally natural pond. It allows the snapping turtles to burrow down into mud to do just all the things that they want to do. And I have noticed a lot of mating behavior and nesting behavior at night. They are coming out at night. And I haven't noticed oviposition yet, per se, but I have seen a lot of activity on that berm and seen where they have really kind of done a lot of excavation. So that's really cool to see. But this is an ongoing experiment, and you can see that there's some algae bloom mixing with the mud in the water column. So, I'm still experimenting with this to see just how effective this pond is over time. But so far, it's been very successful, and the snappers are really happy in here. Their skin condition and their shell condition has really dramatically improved since they've been in here, and that's been over the course of about a year, a little more than a year. And not that they were in bad shape before, but they were in stock tanks with a sand substrate, which is what they need. If you're going to keep them in any kind of artificial enclosure, they have to have a fine sand substrate. You cannot keep them successfully long term on bare substrate or gravel substrate. Like I mentioned earlier, you will run into problems eventually, and it's going to harm the turtles. But they had that look that a lot of captive alligator snapping turtles get, where the skin gets a pale gray and the shell becomes kind of a pale tan. And I've never been able to figure out exactly why that happens. I mean, best guess is it has to do with a combination of tannins and soil acidity and things like that they're just not getting in a stock tank. But since they've been in here over just a year's time, they have really darkened. Their skin is wonderful. There's the texture, the color is amazing. They didn't have any issues before, but they just look much more like wild snapping turtles. They don't look like captive snappers anymore. They look like they've been in the wild. The shells are a really rich, dark color again. It's just really encouraging to see. So I would encourage anybody who is keeping alligator snapping turtles, you know, if you have the appropriate soil and the space, this is really something that you can do, to try. And what I've had to do here is actually, and I know it doesn't look very good, but I've got cattle panels up encircling this, and one of the corner boundaries is this galvanized stock tank. I had to do this because the snapping turtles, at least one of them, was coming out at night, and it was actually the male, it was not the female. He was coming out at night and he was climbing out of here before I put these cattle panels up. He was climbing over that concrete wall and into the wood turtle pen and into their pond. Now, I was freaked out when I first found this out because I was afraid he was going to, start eating wood turtles and box turtles. He didn't harm anybody, but obviously that was not a situation I wanted to continue or take any chances with. So I put up the cattle panels, and that has been an effective barrier. He's not gotten out since, but he's a whole story unto himself, that big male in here. He is quite a clever, highly intelligent, and very very interesting animal to work with. So we'll do a profile on him at some point. But I've got some black bamboo growing in the corner there. So that is Phylostachys nigra. And it's doing very well. It's not quite as large as it's supposed to get. But anyway, that's a whole another issue, a botany issue. But I've got a lot of driftwood in here, a lot of leaf litter that I put in here to really, help condition that water. And like I said, it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing experiment. And as I said, there are 4 alligator snapping turtles in here. None of them are extremely large. We're talking about 40 to 50 pounds for the biggest. And they're all around that same size range. And they do get along very well. I haven't seen any aggression between them in here. Now, if you were keeping them, very, very constricted in a crowded environment, that would be a different story. But they all have their different areas, and they're doing very well. So that's a quick look at the alligator snapping turtle pond.